Today, we are going to study the poem The Lamb by William Blake, one of the most important poets of the Romantic period. This poem is taken from his famous collection Songs of Innocence, and it represents the purest form of human experience, innocence. In this session, we will understand not just the meaning of the poem, but also its deeper philosophical ideas, symbolism, and literary beauty. By the end, you will be able to explain the poem clearly in exams with confidence and depth. Let us begin with the life of William Blake, because understanding his background helps us understand his poetry more deeply. William Blake was born on the 28th of November 1757 in London and lived until the 12th of August 1827. He was not just a poet, but also a painter and an engraver. This combination is very important, because Blake did not separate art and poetry, he blended them together in a unique way. Coming to his early life, Blake was born into a middle-class family. His father, James Blake, worked as a hosier, which means he sold clothing items like stockings. Unlike many writers, Blake did not receive formal schooling. Instead, he was educated at home. This actually gave him the freedom to develop his imagination in an unusual way. One of the most interesting aspects of Blake's childhood is that he claimed to have visions. From a very young age, he said that he could see angels, divine figures, and spiritual scenes. Whether we take these visions literally or symbolically, they clearly influenced his poetry, which is filled with spiritual and mystical ideas. Now, looking at his career, Blake was apprenticed to an engraver. This training shaped his artistic skills and later allowed him to create what we call illuminated printing, where he combined text and images on the same page. This is a rare and distinctive feature of his work. Another important point is that Blake was not famous during his lifetime. In fact, many people ignored his work or considered him strange. However, after his death, critics and scholars recognized his genius, and today he is regarded as one of the greatest poets of English literature. So, Blake's life shows us a creative genius who was ahead of his time, deeply spiritual, and uniquely artistic, and all these qualities are clearly reflected in his poem The Lamb. Now let us look at the literary position of William Blake and understand where he stands in English literature. Blake is considered a major figure of the movement known as Romanticism. The Romantic poets focused on emotion, imagination, nature, and individual experience rather than logic and reason. Blake fits perfectly into this movement, but at the same time, he is also unique. He is especially known for three important qualities. First, mysticism. His poetry often deals with spiritual visions and unseen realities. Second, symbolism. He uses simple images like the lamb, the child, and the tiger to convey deeper philosophical meanings. Third, religious imagination. His works are deeply influenced by biblical ideas, but he presents them in a very personal and imaginative way. Some of his most famous works include Songs of Innocence, published in 1789, which presents a world of purity and joy. Then Songs of Experience, published in 1794, which shows the darker side of life. Together, these two works present contrasting views of human existence. Another important work is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where Blake explores the relationship between opposites. So, Blake's literary position is that of a visionary romantic poet who combines simplicity with deep spiritual and symbolic meaning. Now let us understand the background of the poem The Lamb by William Blake. This poem was published in the year 1789 and it is part of Blake's famous collection Songs of Innocence. This collection focuses on a world of purity, simplicity, and childlike happiness. The Lamb is one of the most important poems in this collection because it clearly represents the idea of innocence. An important point for exams is that this poem has a companion poem called The Tiger, which appears in Songs of Experience. While The Lamb presents a gentle and peaceful view of creation, The Tiger presents a more complex and fearful view. Together, these two poems show the contrast between innocence and experience. The central idea of The Lamb is very simple but deeply meaningful. The poem explores who created the lamb, and through this question, it leads us to think about God as a loving and gentle creator. At the same time, It highlights innocence, purity, and the close connection between nature, the child, and the divine. So, this poem is not just about a small animal. It is actually about creation, innocence, and God's love expressed in the simplest and most beautiful way. Now let us understand the significance of the title The Lamb in the poem by William Blake. At the surface level, the title refers to a simple, gentle animal, a lamb. But in this poem, the lamb carries deep symbolic meaning. First, it represents innocence and purity. A lamb is soft, harmless, and gentle, just like a child. So, it becomes a perfect symbol of childhood and a pure state of mind. At a deeper level, the lamb is also a strong religious symbol. In Christian belief, Jesus Christ is often called the Lamb of God. This connects the lamb in the poem directly to Christ, who is seen as gentle, loving, and self-sacrificing. So, the title is not just about an animal, it represents divine qualities. Blake also creates a connection between three ideas: the lamb, the child, and Christ. All three share the same qualities of innocence, meekness, and love. For exam purposes, you can remember this using a simple trick. Lamb stands for love, almighty, meekness, and blessing. These four ideas capture the full meaning of the title. So, the title The Lamb is simple in appearance, but it carries deep symbolic and spiritual meaning. Now let us examine the structure and style of The Lamb by William Blake. The poem is divided into 2 stanzas, and each stanza consists of 10 lines. This balanced structure is very important because it reflects clarity and simplicity, which are central to the theme of innocence. The poem follows a simple rhyme scheme, and the lines are short and rhythmic. Because of this, the poem sounds musical and almost like a song or a nursery rhyme. This musical quality makes it easy to read, remember, and recite, which is why it is often compared to a hymn or a child's song. Coming to the style, Blake uses very simple and childlike language. The vocabulary is easy to understand, and the sentences are direct. However, behind this simplicity, there is deep meaning. This is one of Blake's greatest strengths. He expresses complex spiritual ideas in very simple words. Another important feature is repetition, especially the repeated address to the little lamb and the repeated questions. This repetition creates rhythm, reinforces the theme of innocence, and gives the poem a soothing, lyrical quality. So, the structure and style of the poem together reflect its central idea: simplicity, innocence, and harmony. The first stanza of The Lamb, the speaker begins by asking the little lamb an important question: who made thee? In other words, who created you? This question is repeated several times, which shows the speaker's deep curiosity and sense of wonder. The speaker then describes the lamb in a very gentle and beautiful way. He says that the lamb has been given life and food. It lives happily near streams and in the meadow. This creates a peaceful picture of nature. Next, the speaker talks about the lamb's appearance. The lamb is covered with softest clothing, woolly bright. This means its wool is soft, bright, and beautiful. The description helps us imagine the lamb as pure, gentle, and innocent. The speaker also mentions the lamb's tender voice, which makes all the valleys happy. This means that even the sound of the lamb is soft and pleasant. The lamb does not create fear or noise, it spreads joy and peace. At this stage, the speaker does not answer the question. He only asks it and describes the lamb. This is important because the first stanza is meant to create suspense and make us think about the mystery of creation. The tone of this stanza is full of wonder and curiosity. The speaker is amazed by the beauty of the lamb and wants to know who could have created something so gentle and lovely. This childlike questioning is one of the main features of the poem. Let us now look closely at the first stanza line by line. The poem begins with the line, "Little lamb, who made thee?" This is a very simple question, but it is also very deep. It sounds like the question of a child, innocent, natural, and full of curiosity. A child sees the beautiful lamb and immediately wants to know who created it. At the same time, this line raises a philosophical question about creation itself. Who is the creator of all living things? For exam purposes, remember that this line represents the curiosity of an innocent mind. The speaker does not question with doubt or fear, he asks with wonder. Then Blake repeats the question in another form. Dost thou know who made thee? The repetition is important because it emphasizes the speaker's amazement and innocence. It also creates a musical rhythm in the poem. The line suggests that the lamb itself does not know the answer, but the speaker is preparing to explain it in the next stanza. Next, the speaker says, "Gave thee life and bid thee feed." Here, the creator is shown as someone who gives both life and food. The lamb has not created itself. It depends completely on a loving creator. This suggests that God is not only the maker of life, but also the provider who cares for his creation. Then we have the line, "By the stream and o'er the mead." The stream and the meadow create a peaceful natural setting. The stream suggests purity and freshness, while the meadow suggests calmness and beauty. This is an example of pastoral imagery, because Blake presents nature as simple, peaceful, and ideal. So, through these lines, Blake combines childlike questioning with deep religious meaning and beautiful images of nature. Now let us continue with the first stanza. The speaker says, "Gave thee clothing of delight." Here, the word clothing refers to the lamb's wool. Blake describes the wool not just as ordinary covering, but as something delightful and beautiful. This suggests that the lamb's beauty is a divine gift. The Creator has lovingly given the lamb everything it needs. Blake then describes the lamb's wool as softest clothing, woolly bright. This line is rich in sensory imagery. The word softest appeals to our sense of touch, while the word bright appeals to our sense of sight. Through these words, Blake helps us clearly imagine the lamb as gentle, beautiful, and pure. Next, the speaker says, "Gave thee such a tender voice." The lamb's voice, or bleating, is presented as soft and gentle. It is not harsh or frightening. Instead, it becomes a symbol of innocence and harmony. The lamb's voice reflects the peaceful nature of the world of innocence. Then Blake adds, "Making all the vales rejoice." The word, vales, means valleys. This line suggests that the lamb's voice fills the whole natural world with happiness. The lamb does not exist separately from nature. It is connected to the streams, the meadows, and the valleys. This creates the idea of the unity of creation, where everything in nature lives together in peace and joy. At the end of the stanza, Blake repeats the opening question again. This repetition reinforces the childlike curiosity and innocence of the speaker. It also prepares us for the answer that will come in the second stanza.